Hello, coaches. Welcome back to another episode of Coach.Better from Eduro Learning. In this episode, we're chatting with our panel of coaching experts from around the world from our Coaching Fundamentals series. We're talking about demonstrating your value as a coach. If you missed our Coaching Fundamentals series, I'll put a card up here somewhere in the corner so you can check it out. This conversation was full of practical strategies and tips for tracking, documenting, and sharing the value coaches add to any school. We talked about the different types of data we could be collecting and how we can use that data to inform our practice as coaches. If you're not tracking your impact as a coach yet, now is a great time to start.
If you're new here, welcome. My name is Clint Hamada.
And my name is Kim Cafino, and we're your hosts for this series. Between the two of us, we have almost 40 years of coaching experience in schools around the world, and we want to help you coach better.
So whether you're already a coach or you're just getting started, we're passionate about helping you take that next step in your coaching journey by sharing thoughtful, professional conversations about coaching and learning with experts from around the world.
And you might notice that Clint and I are never in the same room. That's because I live in Bangkok and Clint lives in Beijing. But we are so excited to get together every week to share and discuss how we can all coach better together.
If you enjoy any part of this episode, please make sure you give it the old thumbs up. It really does help us to know what you want to hear more about. Also, subscribe to the channel so you can see all of the coaching videos and click on the notifications bell so you know as soon as each video gets posted.
Please make sure to watch all the way to the end. We've got some great opportunities for your professional learning that we think you'll love. Let's get started. Welcome back to another Coach Better episode. We are here with a flurry of coaches from all around the world to share some of their expertise with us about ways that we can document and demonstrate our value as coaches to our schools. And let's start by introducing everybody. So I will get Clint to go first. Please introduce yourself, Clint.
Hi, my name is Clint Hamada, and I am the Educational Technology Coordinator at the International School of Beijing.
And Panna, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I am Panna Asavavatana, and I am the pre-K to 1 tech and design coach at Taipei American School.
Awesome. And Dave, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Dave Caleb, and I'm a K-5 digital literacy coach at United World College of Southeast Asia in Singapore, East Campus.
Awesome. Maggie.
Hello, I'm Maggie Hosmer-Grain, and I'm currently living in the UK, and I am not currently in a school, but I am running workshops both for the IB and also for Consilience. And one of the workshops that I run for Consilience is about coaching.
Awesome. Tim.
I'm Tim Bray. I'm the Director of Educational Technology at Cheongna Dalton School in Incheon, Korea.
And Diana.
Hi, I'm Diana Biabout. I'm an Innovation Coach at American International School of Guangzhou in China.
And Marcello.
I'm Marcello Mongardi. I'm a middle school technology integrator and then middle school, high school computer science teacher in Muscat in Oman.
And I'm Kim Cafino, and I am the Chief Innovation Officer for Eduro Learning based in Bangkok. And I know that we should have Ben Sheridan here with us soon, so when he comes in, we'll get him to just give a brief intro. But that's the team for tonight. So we've got a lot of great minds here in one place to talk about the ways that we document and demonstrate our value as coaches. Would anyone like to start off by sharing any initial thoughts about demonstrating your value as a coach in your school? I'll call on Clint because I know he's always got something to say.
I was just giving other people a chance. Not necessarily about my school in particular, but I think in schools in general, I think it is really important to think about how you are demonstrating that value. And I think for each school, it's going to be different depending on what value they're placing on your role as a coach and what your perceived position is. So if my job is to go in and work specifically one-to-one with teachers to help improve their practice, like how can I document the different classes that I'm working with or the different grade levels, things like that. If my coaching role has a big push on professional learning in school professional learning, like how am I ensuring that I'm providing relevant workshops and relevant opportunities for those students and for those teachers and for those administrators. So I think it's really going back to what the the idea of your position is at your school and how that's envisioned. And if you feel like that's something that you want to change or that you want to try and rework to include different elements or remove different elements because you don't think that's integral to your role, then it's thinking about how do you have that conversation with the powers that be to say, hey, this is what's important to this role and this is what I'm going to focus on, or this is what I think I should be focusing on, and helping them understand your role and taking an active role in shaping your role in the school.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Clint on that. I think when I was at KIS, we were a department that they had made, and what happened was, they had the admin team that were educators, but the business office that really sort of ran a lot of the school, they weren't educators, and so they had no idea what we were doing. And so when we started documenting things there to show them what we were doing and what our job was and how much time went into certain things, it was mostly to kind of help them conceptualize it and to defend ourselves and say, like, we need a bigger department even. Because we had, like, I think by the time we had almost 200 teachers. And so it was a lot of people. And at the time that we started, I think there were only 4 of us in ed tech. So it was a lot. It was a stretch. We each had like 50 people we were working with. And so it became like a way to explain to the business office, this is what we do. When I came to CDS, I kind of brought the idea along with me. Here, it wasn't so much like, I think they understood what they wanted me to do and what my role was going to be. What I do here is, like, I use that data to analyze my kind of effectiveness across the school because I'm pre-K to 12 on my own. And so, like, last year at the end of the year, I was able to bring data back to the admin team and point out, like, yes, it makes sense that the high school is the biggest division and that they would get more of my time, but they're getting an unfair amount of my time compared to what middle school and FP are getting. And I was able to show that with the amount of time I've spent in each division and what I was doing. So that gave us a chance to reconceptualize my position and reposition me a little bit. So now 1 day a week I spend in the FP. So I'm specifically there with them all day long to kind of help avoid that problem because they are in a different building. And even though it's, it's not that far away, it's still physically far away in a sense. And so I go over there to be with them now as part of that analysis of what my data showed.
What did, excuse me, Tim, what did you track in the spreadsheet? Or however you tracked it, sorry.
Yeah, that was a good question. Like, I used the Google form, and I made it myself. And then the first section of it was basically listing off a few general idea, things that I do, like, is it creating and building something? Am I promoting the school and social media? Those kind of activities that I do. And then I have another category. There's about 10 of them, and I tried to keep them kind of loose so that they had malleability. They're a little bit fluid sometimes. And then I would track which division it was with. And then I have another part for how much time it took. And then the last question I have is the notes, so I can fill in, like, who I worked with specifically and what would we work on.
Does anyone else do anything like that?
Yeah, we've I've tried that before, and we've looked at sort of tracking. It wasn't necessarily our time. It was more the admin was more interested in who is getting coaching and what type of coaching they're getting. So that's really what we did, because they weren't really interested. They were trusting us to do our job. And some of the times, I'd be creating a tutorial or doing something like that. And it wasn't, I'm not working with anybody, but it's useful time. It's useful use of my time. But they were more looking to see, one of the things that we noticed one time was that a lot of our heads of grade were not getting coaching. And it's because they were often pushing out that to their team members and, not trying to maybe be selfish for themselves. But when we looked at this with the admin together and sort of said, well, maybe we should be looking at trying to promote that more with them. So we've done some sort of tracking form as well before. We also meet once a week with our admin team, and we're sort of talking about who's getting coaching, what are you noticing, that sort of stuff with the coaching team that we have. Because we've got coaches that are not just tech, but math and literacy as well.
I love the idea of looking at it to see who might be not like missing, like not the kind of deficiency thing, but like who are we missing without even realizing we're missing them because we're so busy doing all the other stuff that we're doing. And I think that's a similar way that Tim used it as well, just maybe like slightly different scale. But I think that's a good way to look at who is receiving your support services and making sure that you are supporting everybody.
And also what grade, like sometimes like, wow, this grade is getting a lot of coaching. So wonder why that is, and let's have that conversation. And different times of years for different grades are difficult or whatever it is. So it was good to collect the data and then be able to look at that over time.
Anyone else do anything similar?
We did something similar in American School of Bombay. So we had, in the beginning, we had about 10 coaches actually across the whole school, and they were all full-time teachers. So some of their coaching responsibility actually took part during the meetings that they were already scheduled to attend. But we kept track using a spreadsheet. And so each coach had a tab on the spreadsheet, and they wrote down the teachers that they were coaching. And then across the top of the spreadsheet, we just had months, and they just kept a record of how many times a month they actually met with the people that they were coaching. And it was very much up to the individual teachers to decide. So some teachers said, we want to meet every week just to have a check-in, maybe a 5-minute check-in. And some teachers said, we'd like to meet every 6 weeks and have a more formal, structured conversation. So for us, we were able to record the time that we spent coaching. But I think the other thing that we also did was we encouraged each of the teachers to set a tech goal based on the ISTE standards. And so throughout the year, we would revisit that goal, and we would see where they were and how we could support them in achieving it. And I think the other important thing we did was we looked at the student learning, because what we really wanted to prove is that coaching improves student learning. And so we collected technology artifacts, and over a number of years, we could analyze the artifacts, and we could actually see that there had been a change. Now, that change could have been due to many factors. It might not completely have been due to coaching. But I think that being able to collect and share the data with teachers actually helped them to decide themselves how they wanted to move forward. So it was very important for us to have the data that we could share with them to help them become more self-directed in what they wanted to do.
I know someone else said they do something similar. And before we move on to that other person, I'm just curious, when you say you collected student artifacts over a number of years and being able to collect and share that data with teachers, help teachers become more self-directed, what kind of data were you collecting from the students?
Okay, we were collecting examples of how they'd use technology. So, for example, at the end of a particular unit, we might have asked the teachers, could you share an example of something the students have done in that unit? And we collected all of that information into a Google site. So we had examples of how the students used the tech. And then we went from the Google site onto another spreadsheet where we categorized all of the student artifacts, and we looked at them in two ways. We looked at what actually had the students done, be it a presentation or perhaps it was they were researching, whatever it might be. And then we also looked at what thinking skills were involved. So we looked at the artifacts together with Bloom's taxonomy. And what we noticed when we looked at that, over time, we noticed that students were using technology that was tapping into more higher order thinking skills rather than just using it for perhaps remembering and understanding. That's always important. We still continued to use programs like IXL and Mathletics, but we did notice a shift in the kind of ways that students were using technology simply by giving teachers the data on what we noticed their students doing. It helped them to decide what they wanted to plan for in the future.
I love that. I'm so glad you said that about the Bloom's taxonomy, because I think that is like the first hurdle you have to get over with teachers, especially when using tech, is just like the fear of actually using it and not knowing what to do and how to manage it in your classroom. But then the second hurdle is, I've got comfortable. Like, I'm comfortable using technology for research and to type things up and basically essentially substitution. And I think many of us use like the SAMR model, or we have different ways that we try to describe kind of deeper learning with technology, but that is so concrete and so easy to see, and teachers could so easily reflect, okay, well, all year I've used technology for lower order thinking skills. Maybe next year I can look at potentially thinking about doing something a little bit different. So that's a really practical way to shape teacher professional growth. Maybe it isn't directly related to like documenting your value as a coach, but would definitely show the value as a coach as you see the growth over many years, like you described. Awesome. Did someone else say they also track time similarly? I'm taking notes, by the way, so there will all be show notes.
We did something slightly differently, thinking about what Clint said, where all our schools are in different places. And I feel like we're still in the like, yeah, woohoo, we can really make a difference, kind of trying to sell the tech coach position. So what we've done, Mike, the elementary integrator, and I, is we started working with teachers through the ISTE standards. That was our sort of vehicle. And so we started to document for ourselves just everything that we did just on a Google Doc, like, so that it's amazing how at least me, it helps me to organize it and see what I'm actually doing, what direction I'm actually moving in, when I can look at what I've been doing over the last 5 days. But the most valuable thing, I think, was we kept the blog together that was just shared with ourselves, the tech director, and our principals. So he would reflect on his meeting with his science teachers, and then I would document my meeting with the social studies teacher in middle school. And after a while, it became interesting to just see what the ISTE standards looked like through different people's different departments. And I think it was useful to just for our principals, just to see what we're doing and what can happen to learning, or certainly what can happen to teachers' practices when they start to look at things that they've been doing anyway, but look at them through the ISTE standards and perhaps kind of expand them. So keeping the blog was good for us.
Anyone else keep track?
I don't keep track. Can I just jump in? Only because I feel like this year our role has significantly shifted, in that I was having a full teaching load last year, and then suddenly I've got all these open coaching spaces. And I think that just listening to you all and your experiences that you've had at different schools and the different ways you've collected data is really, like, I guess, enlightening for me, because already, starting from when Clint began talking, we have the different members of school and the different communities, the teachers, the admin, and us, the tech coaches, who all need to come to a common understanding of, like, okay, with this new schedule, how is our role shifted? And the very first thing that happened at the beginning of the year was we had a high up administrator walk by our doors, look at our schedule, and was concerned with the amount of open time there was, how it wasn't full. And she was like, what are they doing in this open time? And so just by listening to the various ways that you guys have chosen to document your time and your coaching and how you're communicating with your teachers and having that all come together, I think is now very important for us to move into, so that we all come to a common understanding of what our role is evolving into.
Your point, Panna, connects with what I was going to say, where we had a very similar situation at ISB when I was there. I talk about it all the time, so sorry that I'm always bringing up the same story, but it was really great because, like Dave was mentioning, we had coaches for all different subject areas, and we all sat in the same office. And I don't necessarily think we had the same exact thing, like you were saying, Panna, like an administrator coming in and being like, well, what are you doing with your free time? But it was kind of like, all right, we've got science coach, we've got a literacy coach, we've got tech coaches, like, how are they really making a difference? And we did very similar, I think probably a kind of a bit of a cross between Dave, Tim, and what Maggie said. We had a collaborative spreadsheet for all of our coaches. Our names were down across the bottom. And then we had types, I probably have it somewhere. I didn't think to open it before this, which I should have. I think we had types of support that we gave across the top, and maybe dates, or we put the dates in the cells and then the names on the left-hand side or something. But basically at the end of each meeting, it would run a graph, update the graph for us, so we could see, like, Kim was in this many classrooms this week, doing this many different kinds of things with this many different types of teachers. Jeff was doing, we could show it for all of us. And so on a regular basis, we could share that very simple, concrete data with the administrative team so they could see that maybe our schedules were entirely open, but actually this is the amount of hours we spent doing all these things. And coming back to Dave's point about sometimes we are doing things that isn't working with teachers, but it's actually really valuable, like creating tutorials or whatever the case may be. That was also tracked in that spreadsheet. And I think that helped, I don't know like how much, but I think it definitely helped school leadership, especially like the top level leadership who are obviously most distant from what's happening in the classroom, understand that that free schedule allowed us to do not only collaborative work with teachers in classrooms, but also that prep and reflection work before and after those sessions that is just as valuable and potentially has more of an impact, because that almost empowers teachers to be more self-directed in what they're doing already. So I think that this idea of documentation is really critical, whether it's reflection for you, deepening understanding for your admin, or even identifying who's not getting support in your busy work day that you don't realize. Like there's so many avenues that this type of documentation can support and enhance in your role as a coach.
For me, I'm hearing, I'm like getting a lot of great ideas as far as documentations. I did start a form for myself to just start putting in data. I need to be more intentional in doing that. And I think what the challenge can be, and I work with a lot of newer coaches. Sometimes they're the first ed tech coach in their school. And you can gather this data, but then compare it to, if there's not, expectations. I mean, the data could lead to having a discussion about those expectations of your role as a coach. And I think that's probably having these type of ideas, particularly for new coaches, and how to, because they even, I still get questions like, and I'm new at my school as well, so there's a whole other process going on there. But the whole, like, what do you do? Like, if they walk by, like Kenna said, if somebody walks by and you're sitting in the office, even though I'm putting together resources in that, they just see me sitting in the office. So how can I gather this data and then also either, compare them to the expectations or help to develop the expectations for our role?
I think Dave was talking about it. The words, I don't know the exact words, I'll paraphrase, but he was having conversations based on data, not necessarily making decisions based on data, right? The data that you're generating and that you're looking at to kind of think of, the data itself isn't proving your value as a coach, but the data is allowing you to have thoughtful conversations about where you are making impact on student learning, where you are making impact on teacher development, where you are making impact on school culture. That whole thing holistically is maybe helping to prove your value or demonstrate your value, right? I'm hoping we're out of the age of data-based decision making and we're more into the age of like data-based conversations, because I think the data itself doesn't have value. It's the conversation that the data can stimulate that has that value and that helps everybody move forward. And it's what's the data that's going to be useful to you as an individual and maybe useful to your administrator or your supervisor or maybe useful to your board of directors, because we all know that when things get tight, and in international schools or in any school district, the budget at some point is going to get tight. The positions that are the first to go aren't going to be your classroom teachers. They're going to be your coaches and your support people. How do you demonstrate that value over time so when they come knocking 3 years down the road, you can already say, this is what we're doing, and this is why the school is as good as it is. Like, I don't know who you cut, but don't cut me.
And I think you make a really good point, Clint, about demonstrating your value over time, because I think in the moment we can all say, I'm so busy, I've been doing X, Y, and Z, and this grade level is doing this, and this grade level is doing that. And, you can like with enthusiasm share that with school leaders when you're walking around the hallways and, you get your moment in your faculty meetings or your morning briefings or whatever. But this idea of demonstrating the impact that you're having over time is so valuable, and it seems like annoying to tick those boxes or fill in those forms or write that blog post or whatever it is that you're doing in your school setting that works for you. But when you can look back 3 years later and say, look at the growth in student depth of learning through the use of technology according to Bloom's taxonomy, because you've tracked all those things, then all that like fiddly work, documenting it all, becomes really valuable.
And let's be honest, it's great for your next job as well, because you can say, hey, look, if this is the work that I've done over the last 5 years at this school, and this is the results that I'm showing for it, I could bring that to you as well. There are so many uses to this data, proving I can't even remember what the original prompt is, like demonstrating your value as a coach to your current school, as well as demonstrating your value as a coach to your future school as well. There's so many reasons to be thinking about this in a context that fits your individual school, like things that Dave might be doing in Singapore and things that Panna might be doing in Taipei and things that Marcella might be doing in Oman might not work for us in Beijing. But what will work for us in Beijing is the conversation, and even just having that conversation about what data should we collect. So I think empowering for your team of coaches.
Is there anything that you guys have specifically seen, and I know we've kind of talked about this with the data, but that you've specifically seen as an outcome of keeping track of the data that is a real point of reflection for you, or enabled you to have a specific conversation with a school leader or school board or anything like that, where you're like, oh, this was totally worth it for me?
I think I already mentioned it, but being able to have an informed discussion about how my time was being spent and how certain parts of the school were being underserved and not receiving the support they needed because of where my office is located and because of the building that I'm in and all those kind of things. And actually, we just changed the high school director, and I had a conversation with him when he came in, and I said, he's actually returning. He was here before. He was getting a degree and then came back. When I was talking to Jiho when he came back, and I said, like, look, one of the things I'd like to do is to move the training room to a more centrally located area. And he totally understood why, but unfortunately there's just no room there right now. So he was like, well, I need to have the learning support person there. And so it was he understood the reason why we needed to move it. But there was another reality of like the fact that the learning support person has FP students that come to his room sometimes. And so he also needs to be centrally located. And I just said, that's totally fine. I'd rather have him where he needs to be, and people can walk a little bit further to get to my training room. Like that's a no-brainer. But we were able to have those discussions because of the data. And we were able to make like Clint was saying, conversations that were actually, the data was part of that conversation, but that data didn't decide anything. It was just the thing that drove the conversation.
This is all kind of making me think of how often we hear whether or not technology is successful in our schools, like for improving student learning. And I know that Clint and I had a conversation with Will Kirkwood about the data that Zurich International School collects in terms of representing the improvement to student learning. I wonder if we can use all these kinds of strategies to help demonstrate or document the improvement in student learning as well. Like right now we're talking about it, demonstrating the value of the coaching role, but we could also do very similar to what Maggie did, demonstrating the value of the technology that we have access to in our schools.
Yeah, I'm going to dig up a whole bunch of old voice threads right away after this meeting.
What I was going to say, Kim, to kind of tag onto that a little bit, is that the data that we collected was very useful for showing us that there were gaps. And there were two big gaps that emerged from the data that we collected. One of which was that digital citizenship wasn't really being taught very intentionally. It was more reactive than proactive. So it was dealt with when something happened, but it wasn't really built into what teachers were planning. And I think the other thing that we also noticed was that there was very few global collaborative projects going on. And in fact, digital citizenship and global collaborative projects can really go hand in hand. So noticing the gaps in what the teachers were doing and what the students were doing actually helped the teachers when they were thinking about future planning, because they could plan to address the gaps that they noticed.
I'm just thinking about what Maggie was saying as well. And I'm wondering too, you're talking about collecting student artifacts. What role, this is the first thing that popped in my mind, what role student portfolios play? Because a lot of the things, especially around educational technology, a lot of the things that you will see, the growth that you will see isn't going to necessarily be measured on your ISA or your MAP test or your PSATs, right? It's going to be those thinking dispositions and those thinking skills that you need to document over time and like look back, hey, this is where I was in grade 4 and this is where I am now in grade 7, and look at how much I've grown as a learner, and just thinking about how maybe really what Maggie's talking about is creating a portfolio of work around the ed tech discipline, right? And be like, hey, this is what it looked like in 2012, and this is what it looked like in 2015, and now this is what we've reimagined it in 2018. Look how we've grown as a school, and look how we've grown as a grade level, or it's like what does your grade level portfolio of assessment look like over time, or your departmental grade or your departmental portfolio of assessment and tasks look like over time? It's an interesting thing to think about in collecting that kind of longitudinal data for your school.
I wonder, do we keep pigeonholing ourselves by referring to things as technology or educational technology? Couldn't we just call it authentic work?
And Ben just jumps right in. Ben, I promised everyone that you would introduce yourself when you came in, so tell us who you are real quick.
Who's that guy?
Yeah. I'm Ben Sheridan, a learning innovation coach at NIST International in Bangkok, Thailand. Sorry I'm late. It sounds like you guys have been having great conversations already. I'm like, oh. So
we have. No, and I think that your point about authentic student work or demonstration of authentic student learning is, yeah, absolutely. We kind of started at this part of the conversation because we went through talking about all the different ways that the coaches collect and document data on what they do and how powerful and useful that has been for them as individual coaches. And that kind of led us to talking about how oftentimes schools question the value of all the money they're spending on technology. And could we collect some data in this kind of similar way to identify where, how, and why we might be using those tools? So that's how it kind of got focused on the tools bit. I don't know if you want to say more on that, but I have another thought.
Well, real quick, I would say absolutely, but where's the data to support anything that's done in any area of school? And so if you want to have a conversation around like data and how it supports what we do at school, then we need to be collecting data. I just literally had this conversation the other day about a professional learning day that we were planning. And I said, that someone asked about that. And I said, that's a great point. So where's the data on any and every professional learning opportunity we have at our school? Because we should be collecting data on that.
We need little conversations like this for those little, like, I don't want to call them zingers, but those little zingers that in the moment I'm often like totally caught off guard and I don't have my like perfect answer. But then once I've heard you say it, I will remember it for my next meeting. And I have a story about this from Clint. One time we had a teacher, Clint, I don't know if you remember this particular scenario. This person was not being difficult or anything, but it was after a faculty meeting. This was a PE teacher, and they were complaining that it takes too long to teach the kids how to use Explain Everything when they can just write something by hand. And Clint, his answer was so perfect. He was like, well, remember, you teach whatever grade 4, and they've been learning since kindergarten how to write something by hand. So they've had years and years and years and years and years of practice, and you're expecting them to be just as good with a new tool you just showed them today. And I remember like just looking at Clint like,
yeah,
I need to save this.
Quiet you.
I've never forgotten that moment. But yeah, no, you're entirely right, Ben, about we need to collect data for everything. And I don't know why technology is always the one it's because it's expensive, I guess, and visible. It's always the one that gets called out kind of first. But all of these conversations have been making me think about the importance of collecting the right data. And I kind of come back to Maggie's point that at ASB it was identified that digital citizenship was not taught intentionally, but instead was very reactive, and there were very few global collaborations going on. And it makes me wonder, unless you had like the right data, would you even notice that? And how do we even know what the right data is?
A good question.
That is the $1 million question.
Definitely, there's a huge value in the thing that Maggie said. Like, until you start gathering data about your curriculum, there really is no way to know where the holes are. I mean, and you know intuitively, I think, as an educator, that there are holes, but you just have no idea where they're at. And until you start gathering something to be able to look at it and say, how do we know this was taught? Where was it taught? Who taught it? How did they teach it? Until you have that information, your curriculum is not a viable curriculum. It's just a theory that's there. And how did Stacy put it? If it's an Atlas Rubicon, it's gone off to where it's going to die. You know, it's just now stored somewhere, and it's just a thing we have that we go and we update it. But does it have any meaning if you don't have anything to show that it's been actually taught?
Yeah, I think the type of data, that's one of the things that I really struggle with, because I've seen other coaches collect data on, they'll go and they'll do a survey at the end of the year, and they'll have their outcomes, and they'll say, they'll look at the curriculum and say, okay, grade 4s, here are the outcomes. How do we do this? And they're like, yeah, we kind of did this, we kind of did that. And it's just like, what kind of data am I collecting here? I love the idea of collecting, samples that you have. So this is like grade 4, this is what we have, and we've done this because we do that with writing. Come into my group and say, hey, let's bring in a sample from each of your grades about something they've done, and let's look at them. I think that's really important. But then I also think over years, hopefully those would improve just like any other things would improve, because as the teacher who's teaching that gets more proficient and understands whatever they're doing more, 3 years down the road, those examples will look very different than they did today.
So I think there's a lot of people who spend all their time looking at this sort of thing, like data collection. And like there's improvement science, and they say you have to look at, okay, what do I want to change? What's the intervention? What am I going to measure? And it just comes down to, what am I looking for? And that what you're looking for tells you what effect you're having based on whatever plan of action you have. But it's so difficult. I don't want to say the lay person, because we're educators and stuff, but there are people who spend all their time looking at how to collect information and how to analyze information. There's this really interesting guy I met, Damien Bevel. I think that's how you say his name. You guys know who I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. And he looks at ways of measuring stuff that I would never think of, and it's fascinating. And so one small example that blew my mind was they were looking at technology implementation at a school, and they asked kids to draw a picture of their classroom. And have I shared this before? Okay. So like the first year, the kids drew a picture of the classroom, and it was so funny. It was all the kids in rows looking at the teacher standing at the chalkboard, and then this little speech bubble, and it just said blah blah blah. And that was what a typical classroom. And then that was the year of implementation. Then next year they do same student drew a picture of the classroom, and it's a student sitting at a table with earphones on at a computer. So like something has definitely changed in that classroom. So like maybe that's not the end all be all data that you need to collect, but that's definitely tell you there's been some shift in how that classroom operates. And so that just sort of opened my eyes, because sometimes we get stuck in this quantitative measurement thing. We have to look for effects, and what's the effect size? It's statistically significant, blah, blah, blah. But there's all sorts of different ways that you can collect information. And I don't know, data sometimes we throw that word around a lot, but it's really sort of just, it's informing us, right? It's informing how we move forward. And I think Andy Hargrave says it's not data driven, it's data informed. So we want to be data informed. So we don't want the data to tell us exactly what to do. We want it to help us understand the effects we're having on whatever it is that we're doing.
Tell me that guy's name again, Damien Bevel?
Yeah, I think it's Bebbel, or I don't know, couple L's, couple B's, and throw some E's in there. Very, very cool guy.
Awesome. Anyone have any other thoughts about data in any way, or demonstrating your value as a coach, how you do that with both your teachers, your students, your parents, your school leaders?
Just a thought on data is trying to paint a true picture of what's happening. If you are collecting artifacts, it's so tempting to just pick some really great stuff that's happening and put that away. I mean, it's hard to pick stuff that shows deficiency or gaps. Often it's not there, right? There's nothing to pick. That's why there's a gap. But if there is stuff you could, artifacts that do show that things are missing, perhaps. So things are, like, I think digital citizenship is a great example, which we need probably to have a whole series of talks about digital citizenship. But there's plenty of artifacts I could pick that show that we're really not doing a great job with digital citizenship, you know, that if I looked at it perhaps in a few years, I'd be like, wow, we were really struggling back then. So.
Oh, I think your point of not cherry picking only the best, right?
Yeah, right.
And trying to provide a range of examples, you know, low, medium, high, or whatever, however you want to term it, so that, you know, this is probably the top of the range of the student examples, but this is also average work, so that you can see not everybody was making these cinematic masterpieces as part of their digital storytelling unit. Some people just were doing stick figures and taking pictures, and it wasn't really much of a stop motion animation, but that's where they were, right?
And where does coaching? Yeah, how is your coaching coming through in the average work? How's your coaching coming in the low end work? You know, is it affecting that over time?
Right. Correct. Then back to that $1 million question, what data do you collect? I'm going to go back to what I said at the very, very beginning. Like, what is it that you find that you value in your role, or how has your role been defined, or how do you want to define your role? And then how do you find the data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, that's going to help you potentially document that? And also maybe know that the data that you choose this year may not do that very well, and be open to changing what you're looking for or how you're documenting that data. I think, you know, it is an inexact science to some extent. We don't have norm referenced surveys that we can give to all of our students and teachers that we can then say, oh, the effect size is this, like Ben was saying, you know, it's not all about statistical analysis. It's about measuring the temperature of the climate that you're in, right? And also being able to juxtapose that against the effect that you're having or the effort that you're putting into that.
And I have to say, I mean, this is why I love meeting up with you, all of you, because I think I was struggling, like, okay, well, I got to figure out the data to collect. And what I'm getting from these conversations and listening and reflecting is that I'm never going to have the perfect set of things to collect data on. I need to start collecting it on something important to me now, and then use that to reflect, and then share with others, people that I work with, and then make a new set of goals from there. So I think you can get so bogged down in what data to collect and how to collect it and all that. I mean, those are important things, but I think, like you said, looking at your situation at your school, and again, I'm at a new school, so I'm still figuring a lot of things out. So that's why it can be a little like, how, you know, what data do I collect in that? So this is very helpful for me in kind of, okay, have some conversations, start with something, collect some data, look at what you get, and go from there.
Yeah, I also think, we can't fall into the trap of thinking that we're going to collect data to prove something, because we collect data to understand, right? So we're not collecting data to prove we're doing our job. We're collecting data to do our job better. And so data is neutral, and I think we have to remember that. So when we look at what data we can collect, it should be to help us do our job better, to better understand the effects that we're having in doing whatever it is that we're doing. So I think sometimes maybe I'm talking for myself, it's like I think, oh, how can I collect data to prove something? And it's actually, that's not really the way maybe I should enter it. It's how can I better understand what I'm doing, and then look to collect data to help me understand the effects I'm having.
And I think that is the perfect note to end this conversation on, the concept of just get in there and give it a go, and to remember that, like Ben is saying, the data is neutral and we're collecting this data to kind of inform the way we do our jobs and help us do our jobs better. It's not going to prove one thing or another. It's just there to give us some information to reflect on. So it's not a scary thing to start. Just start and give it a try and see what you collect, if it's useful or not. And if it's not, change what you collect the next time you have an opportunity to do so. So thank you everybody so much for your time tonight. It was great to chat with you this evening, as it always is, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you'll know when we release a new video each week. Here at Eduro Learning, we want to help you coach better. To get you started, we've got some great resources to share with you right now. The first is a free digital download called 5 Strategies for Your Coaching Toolkit, and it's linked in the description box below. Plus, you can join our Facebook group, Coach.Better, to connect with other instructional coaches around the world. The link is also in the description box below. If you're looking for even more learning, we are just about to start our next cohort of the Coach Microcredential. This academic year-long mentorship program includes 26 weeks of course content, a supportive network of like-minded participants who are coaches, and your own private mentor. Cohort 3 starts on April 28, 2019, and registration opens on March 4th. If you are ready to sign up right away, we have some great early bird bonus offers starting on January 15th, and spaces are limited, so please check it out. Are you ready to coach better? Get a preview to what you'll learn and see what past participants have to say at edurolearning.com/coach. And finally, if you haven't caught it yet, our weekly Coach.Better SlowChat on Twitter will help you build your professional learning network, and it's facilitated by 3 of our awesome The Coach participants, so you can see the types of coaches that you'll be learning with. Check out the link in the description box below. We hope that all of these resources are useful for you, and we'd love to hear what you think about them. If you have questions about coaching or guests you'd like to see featured, please leave us a comment and we will do our best to make it happen. See you next time.